Hi, I'm Phil Ball, pastor of Odyssey Christian Church in Jenks, Oklahoma. We're part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and we offer a non-judgmental approach to support your personal journey of faith. After the message, we invite you to keep listening for a presentation from our wonderful band. And if you want to experience worship live, we invite you to find out all the details at www.facebook.com/Odyssey CC.
But anyhow, it's all good. We're here. And Michael, it's so much fun. And this has been one of my most challenging sermons to do because it's like the whole thing is just so rich with stuff. And so we're going to have a good time of it. So let me just dump right into it really quick. Where'd that come from? Oh, got a little excited there. Okay. In the opening scene, there's this older woman played by Jean Stapleton, and she and Michael go to a bank, and it's in Iowa, and it's a little square white bank, and they march in, and then a few minutes later they come marching out, and then there's like a time-lapse thing that goes on, and it's dark, and it gets to be in the evening, and everybody leaves the bank. And then just in a few minutes, a wind comes up and all the bank just falls apart and blows down. It just collapses right on top of itself, which sets kind of the theme, in my opinion, for the movie. And that it's about how the mystical form of God tries to work with us in terms of what I call divine help and protection supporting our lives, and how that interaction may take place in this circuitous, roundabout way as we live each day, because I'm fully convinced that's how it really works in all of our lives. It works, but it's not as clean or as clear as we sometimes might think. And so what I want you to take away tonight is this, that you will come closer to how God works in your life, that it'll become more apparent to you, that you can get in harmony with it, and that you can be patient with it as it processes through it, and patient with yourself as God is patient with us. And so through beyond our understanding, our logic, and our rational perception, God is interested in all these things, and it's like it doesn't abandon the rational components, but it's a whole thing that is beyond it. And so that for us to be open to and discover even more ways that God has loved us beyond our own ability and intelligence, because that's what happens. Okay, so here's the story. The character Varshan Malt, who is played by Bob Hoskins, effectively, I must say, just a real jerk, is the editor of a tabloid called the National Mirror that specializes in unlikely stories about celebrities and unbelievable things that go on with ordinary folks like two-headed chickens and angels that show up at the Milk Bottle Motel and stuff like that. And that then the second major character and really is Frank Quinlan, and played by William Hurt, a reporter whose career has hit the skids. He's gotten fired from big mainline newspapers, and he works for this tabloid now. And then the next person you need to hear about is a guy named Huey Driscoll, played by Robert Pastorelli, a close friend of Quinlan. He's the photographer that goes along, and he's on the verge of losing his job, even though he owns this National Mirror's mascot, which is Sparky the Wonder Dog. And because he owns it, the boss, Malt, puts up with Driscoll's inadequacies. And then the last person in our little troupe that we need to know about is a woman named Dorothy Winters, played by Annie McDowell. And she's been hired as a dog trainer to replace Driscoll. And yet Malt introduces her as an angel expert when they figure out that they're going to send them off on an angel exposition. So there's this perfect setup of human and mystical interaction and all kinds of characters: an overbearing tabloid editor, a reporter on a downhill slide, a photographer, Don Oder, in need of success, a woman angel expert, dog trainer trying to find her way in the midst of a largely unfulfilling, unsuccessful life. And so in the second scene of the movie that just has Quinlan and Driscoll in it, there's a really kind of a revelation about characters. Quinlan is talking to photographer Driscoll, and they're waiting for some kids to line up so they can take their pictures. And Quinlan says to Driscoll, "I'm just saying, Huey, when they handed out the parts, you got the heart. and between us, we are a whole person. Basically, Driscoll says back then, well, does that mean that you're just all the brains? And then they go on back and forth. But it kind of gets at kind of the characters that are all here. And it sets the theme of this movie. So that all these normally messed up humans are going to encounter the very real, down-to-earth, angelic presence of God. But then, there's nothing new about this. Now, hear this little story that you've heard before. Now, at the time of the incense offering, the whole assembly of the people was praying outside. And then there appeared to him an angel of the Lord standing at the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zechariah saw him, he was terrified, and fear overwhelmed him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will name him John. And if I go to a bank building and they treat you unfairly, I will destroy it." Which is what happened in the movie. But I put that little bit in there so that it kind of made sense. And following that appearance, there's a second picture. And that is that angel appeared to Mary with the announcement that she would conceive of a divine child. And she's, like 16 years old max. And there's all this, and that's very unusual and unstrange and doesn't exactly fit into the moral ethics of their community. And then to the shepherds watching their flock by night, who are the dregs of society on the side of the hill, because that's the lowest job that they can find. And in the fourth picture, to Joseph, to warn them to flee to Egypt, an angel shows up to do all that. And so there's all this movement that's in the text, but I know that for myself, for the first part of my adult life, I understood these things as simply literary agents to allow supernatural stuff to make sense, if that makes any sense to you. And yet, I found out later that there really are these spiritual agents that seem to be active within our lives and my life, and that's why this movie really appealed to me. Okay, so let's see just a little bit of it. All right, this is perfect. Now, I'm telling you, in my life, that's how God shows up. And just these unusual kinds of things, nothing that fits your stereotypes. And there's this great conversation that goes on afterwards this angel loves cigarettes, lots of sugar, has an uncontrollable belly laugh, tends to use a large number of non-angelic phrases, does not care much for personal hygiene, and smells like cookies. Always attractive to women, and we'll see this later. So he does all these kind of things, and as this trio of characters is preparing for sleep, they're attempting to get their heads around what they've just seen, and a great discussion follows, revealing Dorothy's past as she projects it onto Michael, and she tells Quinlan and Driscoll, "That is not an angel," and with much conversation to follow, and then finally she states flatly as she closes the door and goes into her room, "Angels don't smoke." And so that whole encounter begins to open up all kinds of spirit issues in our life, because I think in real life, angel encounters, we reveal our innermost selves. Things come out of us. And that's one of, if you'll look at Dorothy's character, that's one of her gifts, is she's fairly transparent. She's not closed like Quinlan is, and she's not guarded, and she allows these things to happen, and all of a sudden she says what she thinks, and then sometimes, like Quinlan, uses that against her. But the thing is, we have to pay attention to all that stuff. So in all this process, we're given an opportunity to grow in faith, and it becomes sacred ground. Everything happens. Okay, next morning, Pansy, Jean Stapleton, unexpectedly dies while she's cooking everybody breakfast. And so Quinlan and Huey stumble on a great story idea. If Michael wants to have some fun on this trip, why not take him to Chicago, where he can really kick up his heels, and we can have an opportunity to exploit this walking angel with the wings in our paper. So Michael reveals that this was his plan from the very beginning. I'd be happy to do that. So they begin to take out the illusion of doing this and take off on a road trip. Well, in that process, Michael's always interrupting them, leading them to life, leading them to new attitudes in how he does things. So it's really cool. When they got this modern Oldsmobile, and remember this is a 1996 movie, so they go out and all get in it, and Michael walks right past it and gets this old, about 60-something Chevrolet station wagon, or 76 Chevrolet station wagon, big old monster thing, and he's sitting in the back seat waiting for them to drive. And he just redirects everything. He doesn't get into a scene. He doesn't point fingers. He doesn't tell them anything. He just does what he does, and then they all relate to it. And so he's back there in the back, and they're driving down the road, and he says, "Oh, look, Pansy left us something, a car bingo game." And then he reads on it, "The miles will fly by and your children won't cry if you play car bingo." And so he starts passing out the bingo cards while they're driving down the road trying to do stuff. And he's having a big time back there, and he says, "You've got to learn to laugh. That's the way to true love." And then he makes them stop at the world's largest ball of twine, because that's the kind of things that interest angels. And I picked these little pieces out because they introduce the interaction. They introduce what's pushing. And Michael had just finished having a battle with that bull. That's the reason you saw him sitting on his butt. And he went out and just ran into it with his head. And it knocked both of them down flat. And then he said something like, I am completely happy. No injuries, 6,360 battles. He'd been doing this a long time. And it's just all kinds of really cool stuff that does perspective that just really, really lights me up about that kind of stuff. And it's like he's interacting with Quinlan, he's moving with him, he's working with him, he's got an interaction going with him. And if you notice, Quinlan put the scarf around his neck. Okay, well, later on, it just gets reversed. And I'm not sure I have that clip up there, but I just need to tell you that there's this way that they're beginning to interact with each other. Okay, so they continue along the road and stop at a small country bar cafe for a rest. And now we go to 43:15. All right, so what he proceeds to do is go dance and get him going. And every woman in the entire bar moves into the dance floor and dances with him, and he gets them all going. Well, it upsets the gentleman that brought them. And so they get into a big bar fight. And you're having a bar fight with a guy who just bumped heads with a 14,000-pound bull. You're going to lose. And they do. And so then the four of the quartet end up in jail, and then they spend the night in jail. And in that process, Dorothy says, "I don't want to be here. I didn't do anything." But she's thrown in jail. And in her transparent self, she reveals that she's been married to 3 losers who did not treat her well. And Quinlan uses that information to put her down and kind of beat her up because she's so open. And so earlier, Michael had, before they ever even left, Michael had said to Quinlan, "I want you to apologize." And Quinlan goes, "What? I'll apologize. I'm sorry. What?" He says, "No, when I tell you, apologize." And so in this jail, in the middle of this operation, Quinlan's beating up on Dorothy. Michael looks at him and says, "Apologize." Well, then he has to struggle with what it means to turn himself around to apologize, because basically Michael's got him by the throat, because they have to have him go to Chicago, and he is just threatening, "I'm not going to Chicago unless you do what I tell you to do." So he gets them out of that leverage. He gets them to do the stuff they needed to do anyhow, if that makes any sense. Because if you're anything like me, that's how God works. And so he does apologize, and he makes himself vulnerable to Dorothy. And he begins then to show compassion for Dorothy's wounded emotions and for the fact that she's been hurt. Well, the next day, Michael continues his winsome ways and helps the female judge. The female judge goes, "In my quarters." And so Michael and she go into her quarters. It never shows any of that, but then it shows them going down the road. Everybody's free, and however that works. And so they moving down the road, and Michael starts singing, "All you need is love." And da-da-da-da. And pretty soon the whole car is singing, "All you need is love." And Michael's looking in this guidebook and he says, we're not far from the world's largest non-stick frying pan. We've got to go see that. And Quinlan goes, "No, we've got to get to Chicago." And he says, "Nope, we've got to go see that." And Quinlan says, "No, we've got to get to Chicago." He says, "I'll give you 10 seconds to change your mind." And so he sits in the back and he goes, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. And when he gets to 10, one of the car's tires blows out. And they have to stop. Well, I believe that's how God works. We're forced through circumstances that happen to us, I want to say in our lives, that happen in our lives to deal with each other in difficult situations, because they all end up sitting on that log because the car, this 76 old beat-up Chevrolet station wagon, does not have a jack, and they cannot change the tire. I'm even surprised it had a spare tire, but they cannot change. So they're just sitting there. And so they start talking, and Dorothy starts talking about her ex-husband, and she pulls out her little lyric songbook, and she writes lyrics to country songs. And she begins to realize things about herself. And then Quinlan compliments her on her songwriting. And then he comments that it'll be days before anyone comes down this godforsaken road who might have a jack. And in less than 10 seconds, a newlywed couple in a pickup truck come down the road, and they both stop, and she's in her gown, and the guy's happy and everything, and they get the car fixed, and off they go. The whole troop, including the newly married couple, join together at a cafe and a motel that has great food, great pie, and a country band. They order 2 pieces of every pie on the menu and share. And then it's time for the video. Okay, so earlier, as you might have determined, Michael had told Dorothy, "When I say sing, you sing." And that's what that was all about. So he started that off. So they have a great night of intimacy with all the pie and all the everything. And if you hadn't figured out, the waitresses have a thing for Michael. And it's just really so neat how all that happens. So Michael's in a field before all of them get up, and he's thinking about things. He's sitting on a log, and he's reflecting on stuff, and he feels he's not accomplished his mission. And he says to give Quinlan back his heart, and he's running out of time. And so he's sitting there, and he's working on that, and Sparky's sitting right beside him, and then the rest of them come out of their rooms, and they call Sparky to him, and he starts running, and he comes across a road, and he's hit by a truck. And so he's killed. And then Quinlan says, "Michael, can't you do something?" And Michael says, "That's not my area." And then Quinlan's just incensed. And he goes, "Well, what is your area?" Kind of a thing. And so he beats him up. And then Michael decides that he will heal him. And that's when his rings pop out, and he brings Sparky back to life. Because basically what Quinlan knows is that Huey has a dysfunctional marriage, and this little dog is the only thing Huey really has. His wife just uses him as a cash register and takes his money and does what she wants, but Huey's so nice, he just can't deal with it. So then Michael turns and says, "I don't have much longer." And so they speed off to Chicago so Michael can see the Sears Tower before he dies, because it's the tallest building in the world at the time. And so Michael gets to see that, and he dies on his back, and you don't see any more of that. And then they go up and they deal with the editor, and basically Quinlan and Dorothy quit, and then they're going out of the building. And as they head out of the building, Quinlan reverts to his old, closed, controlled, non-relational, unfeeling self, and Dorothy looks in his eyes and goes, "Oh, you're back. I thought you had left." And she walks away. Good for Dorothy. Okay, she's not going to put up with that. So the next series of shots show them both going about their separate lives. And we all know in all of our lives it's difficult to change those parts of us that block joy and life and love. Even when we're shepherded by an angel for days, we sometimes fall back into our own personal fears. We're locked into those habits of attitudes that are not of the kingdom of heaven. We are more comfortable in those negative characteristics because they are familiar. They are known to us. When our new, bright, uncertain promised land may be filled with unfamiliar giants. You ever heard that story before? It's in Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, because that's exactly the journey, the movement. Going into the new places of joy are more vulnerable. Quinlan was more vulnerable when he had an open heart, and it hurts. Okay, so now we're going to see the very last part of the movie, and I will finish us from the back of the room, and therefore I'm going to take this out of the way. So angels dance all around us. And our job is to embrace the grace abounds, hope abounds, and chase your dreams. Chase your dreams. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we're so tangible and physical that we don't always know that you are around. And we give you thanks that you give those helpers to us that seem so strange and invite us to do strange things. And we trust that as we take those steps and move forward, that joy will abound. And we give you thanks. Amen.
This song is from the soundtrack, the Michael soundtrack, I believe, isn't it, Phil? It's called, well, yeah, of course it is. It's called Through Your Hands.